My name is Vanessa Cole. I'm 36 years old, and I've spent the last decade reading balance sheets the way other people read faces. I can tell in 4 seconds whether a number is lying to me. That skill was about to do two things in the same room, 15 minutes apart. First, it was going to let me say 6 words to my father in front of 200 investors, 6 words I'd rehearsed in the mirror the night before. And second, without me lifting another finger, it was going to make my half-brother's own laptop tell everyone in that ballroom exactly what he'd spent the last 18 months hiding. He didn't know that yet. Neither did I, standing at that podium, exactly how bad it was going to get for him, only that it was already in motion, and there was nothing left he could do to stop it. Welcome back to her final chapter, where every story starts with silence and ends with power. If you've ever been the one family member who just makes things complicated, this one's for you. Drop a comment, hit subscribe, and let's get into it. 3 weeks before that night, I was just a woman standing in her kitchen, staring at a phone number I hadn't dialed in 6 years. I run a 12-person forensic accounting firm out of a converted warehouse in Charlotte, Cole & Reyes Forensic Advisory. We get hired when boards suspect something is wrong and they're too scared to ask their own CFO. Divorce attorneys send us spouses who think their partner's business is worth half what it actually is. Banks send us companies whose numbers look a little too clean. I've testified in 11 fraud trials. I've never lost a case on the stand. I got here the hard way. I put myself through my CPA license working nights at a diner while doing books for 2 dry cleaners and a landscaping company during the day. I built spreadsheets before I built friendships. Even now, at 36, I still can't fall asleep without running the day's numbers backward in my head, the way some people count sheep, mentally reconciling my own bank balance to the penny before I let myself drift off. My business partner Dana calls it the Vanessa lullaby. It's a small, strange habit. It has nothing to do with anything. Except it does. It always has. I grew up the way a lot of people do in blended families, loved by one parent unconditionally, tolerated by the household around her. My mother died when I was 9. 2 years later, my father, Richard Cole, married a woman named Diane, who came with a 5-year-old son named Trent, and a very clear idea of who the real Cole family was going to be going forward. My father built something real, I'll give him that. He started with one diner in Asheville and turned it, over 30 years, into Cole Hospitality Group. 11 boutique hotels across the Carolinas, the kind with exposed brick and a rooftop bar and a story about authentic Southern hospitality printed on the room key sleeves. I worked the books for that first diner when I was 19, home from community college, because my father asked me to, and because, if I'm honest, I would have done almost anything back then to feel like I belonged in that building. I was good at it. I was fast, careful, and I noticed things other people missed. That's the thing that ended up costing me everything. The call came on a Tuesday. I almost let it go to voicemail. I usually do, when it's him. Vanessa. My father's voice, older now, a little rougher around the edges. We're doing the 25th anniversary gala next month. Downtown Charlotte, the flagship property. Investors, the board, the works. I want you there. 15 years. 15 years since I'd been inside a Cole hospitality event that wasn't a funeral. Why now? I asked. Because you're my daughter, he said. And there was a pause after it, the kind of pause where I could hear him deciding whether to say more. And because it would mean something, to the family, to me. I should tell you now, there is a phrase in this story. 3 words. My stepmother, Diane, has used it on me since I was 21 years old, every single time I said something inconvenient and true. You're making this ugly. I didn't hear it on that call, but I felt it coming, the way you feel weather change in your knees before the sky does anything about it. I'll think about it, I told my father. Don't think too long, he said. Trent's running point on the gala. He'll have Diane send you the details. I hung up and sat at my kitchen counter for a long time, staring at a coffee mug I'd stopped drinking from. 15 years of being the Cole nobody photographed, and now, suddenly, an invitation. I already knew, somewhere under the part of me that wanted to believe him, that this had a number attached to it. I just didn't know the number yet. Here's what actually happened, back when I was 21, keeping books for Cole's Diner on Haywood Street. I found a pattern. Small at first, a few $100s a week in miscellaneous supply charges that didn't match any vendor invoice I could find. Then a few thousand a month, routed through an account labeled Events Contingency, an account Diane had opened and controlled, one my father had never once looked at closely because Diane handled the creative side of the business and he handled the real side. Over 14 months, I traced just over $61,000 that had moved out of that account and into a joint checking account in Diane's and her sister's names. I was 21. I didn't understand politics. I understood numbers. So I printed the reconciliation, 11 pages, highlighted in yellow, and I brought it to my father on a Sunday afternoon while he was doing the crossword at the kitchen table. He read 3 pages, then he set it down. "Diane wouldn't do that," he said. "Dad, I have the bank statements." "You've always had trouble with pressure, Vanessa," he said. Not unkindly. That's what made it worse. "You get fixated on things. Your mother was the same way, God rest her. She'd worry a number until it wasn't even true anymore." Diane came home 20 minutes later. She looked at the 11 pages on the table, looked at me, and said the 3 words for the first time. "You're making this ugly, Vanessa." Within a month, I was quietly removed from doing the diner's books so I could focus on school. Within a year, Trent, 16 at the time, was being groomed to shadow the company's real accountant, being told he had a natural head for the business. Within 3 years, the events contingency account was closed, and nobody ever spoke of it again. Within 5 years, I stopped being invited to Christmas. I want to be fair to my father here, because he wasn't a monster. He was a man who had built something out of nothing, who had lost a wife, who had married a woman who made his house feel less empty, and who could not afford, emotionally, financially, in every sense, to believe that the person managing his new life was stealing from him. It was easier to believe his difficult daughter was fixated. It's a very human kind of cowardice. I've seen it in 100 clients since. I just never expected to see it aimed at me first. Here's the part I don't say out loud very often, the part underneath the principle. I kept a coffee mug from that diner, Cole's Diner, faded orange letters, a chip on the handle. I have never once used it. It sits on a shelf in my office where clients can't see it, and some nights, not many, but some, I still wonder what it would feel like if my father called and the first thing out of his mouth was I was wrong. Not because I need the money, and not because I need the hotels. Because there's a very small, stubborn part of me that is still 21 years old at that kitchen table, still hoping someone will pick the 11 pages back up. That's the part that said yes to the gala. "You're not actually going," Dana said, standing in the doorway of my office with 2 coffees, sliding one across my desk like a bribe. "I am." "Vanessa, they pushed you out of a family diner for finding 60 grand in fraud when you were 21. You think 15 years and 11 hotels later the math got more honest?" "I think I want to see for myself." "That's not a reason. That's a wound talking." Dana sat down across from me, and her voice dropped, the way it does when she's not messing around. "You built a whole career reading rooms like this one from the outside. Don't walk into your own blind spot because a man who's never once apologized to you used the word daughter on the phone." I didn't have a good answer for her. I still went. Stay with me, because what happened over the next 2 hours, I ended up handling in the time it takes to dry your hands. The invitation had said intimate family celebration, close circle only, black tie. Diane's assistant, a soft-spoken woman named Priya, had emailed me a single line. "Just the 4 of us up front, Vanessa. You, your father, Diane, and Trent. A real family moment before the crowd arrives." There were 212 people in that ballroom by 7:15. I stood near the back entrance in a navy dress I'd bought specifically because it didn't announce anything, watching investors in tuxedos take champagne off silver trays, watching a projection screen the size of a garage door cycle through drone footage of all 11 hotels set to orchestral music. A banner behind the stage read, "Cole Hospitality Group, 25 years of family, in gold script 2 feet tall, intimate family celebration, sure." I found Priya near the check-in table, clipboard in hand, and asked her, as casually as I could, what exactly tonight was for. She hesitated, the way people do when they're about to say something they weren't supposed to say out loud. "The pre-IPO investor round," she said quietly. "Cole Hospitality's going public in Q2. Tonight's really the soft pitch." She caught herself. "But it's also the anniversary. Both things." Nobody had mentioned an IPO to me. Not once in 3 weeks of phone calls about family. I made my way toward the stage, and that's when I saw it. The thing that told me more than any spreadsheet could have. On a side table near the gift registry display, someone had set out a memorial arrangement. An old photograph of my mother and father on their wedding day, in a frame with a hairline crack across the glass that had been there since I was a child, propped up next to a 3-tier ice sculpture and a case of 2015 Dom Perignon that I happen to know retailed north of $400 a bottle. The crack in that frame had never once been fixed in 27 years. The champagne had been ordered by the case. I stood there a moment too long, and a caterer, a young man refilling glasses, said gently, "Careful, that one's a trip hazard. They keep meaning to move the table." Nobody had meant to move anything in this family in 15 years. That was sort of the point. I found a quiet hallway near the service entrance to collect myself before I had to smile at anyone. It was there, alone, that I saw it. Trent's laptop, open on a folding table outside what was clearly a staging room for the AV crew, unlocked, the screen still glowing on a QuickBooks dashboard someone had forgotten to close. I want to be honest with you, I didn't go looking. I have built an entire career on the principle that you don't go looking uninvited. But it was open, on a public folding table, 12 feet from 200 investors about to be pitched on this company's financial health, and the account name at the top of the screen read, Q4 Contingency, Trent Cole. I glanced once toward the ballroom doors. Nobody was watching. I looked at the screen for 11 seconds. That's all it took. $74,000 had moved out of a company operating account over the past 18 months, routed through 3 different vendor shell entries, and landed, based on the wire memos I could see without touching a single key, in accounts tied to something called Riverstone Sportsbook LLC. I have seen this exact pattern before, in 6 other cases. I knew immediately what I was looking at. My hands went cold, and underneath the cold, something almost like relief. The horrible, familiar relief of being right about something everyone told you to let go of. I stepped back from the table like it was on fire. That's when Diane found me in the hallway. "There you are," she smiled, the kind of smile with teeth but no eyes. "The photographer's ready for the family shot. Try to look less," she gestured vaguely at my whole self. "Tense, Vanessa. Tonight isn't the night." Brick number 1. At the family photo, 5 minutes later, under lights so bright I could feel them on my skin, Trent leaned toward me while the photographer adjusted his tripod and murmured, "Just for me. Still counting pennies, Van? Some of us actually run the business now." Brick number 2. And when my father put his arm around my shoulder for the photo, stiff, unfamiliar, like he was performing a gesture he'd read about rather than remembered, Diane leaned in on his other side and said, loud enough for the photographer and 2 nearby board members to hear, with a laugh threaded through it like she was being charming, "Our Vanessa always did have a flair for the dramatic. Runs in the family. Her mother was the same." Brick number 3. And the first time that night, the old phrase's cousin came out sideways, dressed up as a compliment. The full 3 words came 20 minutes later, when the MC announced a short break before opening remarks, and I pulled my father aside, alone, by the gift table, and asked him, quietly, carefully, the way you'd diffuse something, whether he knew what the company's Q4 contingency account was being used for. His face changed, just slightly, just enough that I knew he already had a bad feeling he'd been ignoring. Diane appeared at his elbow out of nowhere, the way she always seems to. "Richard, the investors are waiting." Then to me, quiet and sharp, "You're making this ugly, Vanessa. Tonight, of all nights." Second time, aimed directly at me, in front of witnesses. I looked at my father's face and understood, with total clarity, that he was about to ask me for something I was not going to be able to give him. The lights dimmed. My father took the stage to applause, his silhouette huge against the drone footage still looping behind him. Hotel after hotel, string lights, infinity pools, his life's work stitched into a 2-minute reel. He thanked the board. He thanked the investors. He thanked Diane for 25 years of partnership, and Trent for carrying this company into its next chapter. And then, with a warmth in his voice I hadn't heard directed at me since I was a child, he said my name. "And I want to thank my daughter, Vanessa. Some of you know she's built one of the most respected forensic accounting practices in the Southeast." A ripple of polite, impressed murmurs moved through the crowd. "Vanessa, would you come up here a moment?" I walked up because 200 people were watching and there was no version of that room where I didn't. My father put a hand on my shoulder, faced the crowd, and smiled the smile he uses when he's closing a deal. As many of you preparing due diligence know, having a licensed forensic CPA in the family who's reviewed our books gives everybody in this room a lot of comfort heading into next quarter. He turned to me, still smiling, and lowered his voice just slightly, pitched for me, for the front rows, for anyone paying close attention. Vanessa, would you just say a few words? Tell everyone the numbers look solid. Just make this easy tonight. Just make this easy. The third time. Not from Diane's mouth this time, from his. I let the silence sit. 1 second, 2, 3, 4. 5 full seconds of silence in a ballroom of 212 people, my father's hand still on my shoulder, the drone footage of 11 hotels still glowing behind us both, Diane's smile frozen somewhere in the front row, Trent's jaw tight beside her. 5 seconds is a very long time on a stage. I have learned, across 11 trials, that it is exactly long enough for a room to start listening. I can't do that, I said, and I think you already know why. My father's smile didn't fully leave his face. It just stopped reaching anywhere behind it. Vanessa. I found something tonight, I said, and I kept my voice level, the exact register I use on the witness stand, the one that has never once shaken in 11 years. Not because I went looking for it, because it was left open on a table 12 feet from this room. I held up my phone. Earlier in that hallway, before I'd stepped back from Trent's laptop, I had done the one thing my training tells me to always do the moment I see something like that in the wild. I documented it. 3 photographs, time-stamped, untouched, unaltered, taken from a lawful vantage point in a public hallway, of a screen someone else had chosen to leave open. 18 months ago, $740,000 started moving out of this company's Q4 contingency account, I said. Routed through 3 vendor entries that don't correspond to any real vendor I could find in about 11 seconds of looking. It's been landing in accounts tied to an online sports book. The room did not gasp the way it does in movies. It did something quieter and worse. It went completely, utterly still, 200 people suddenly doing the math on what this meant for the offering they'd flown in for. That's not... Trent had come up the side steps to the stage now, his face white, reaching for something to say. That account is under review. Those are pending reclassifications. That's completely normal in... Then you won't mind, I said, still calm, if I read the wire memo dates out loud. He lunged for my phone. I stepped back. He tried again, grabbing at the air where the phone had been a half-second before, and this time Priya, standing near the AV table with her clipboard still in hand, watching all of this with her mouth slightly open, instinctively stepped between us, and Trent nearly knocked over a floor monitor speaker instead, catching it clumsily against his own knee in front of the entire investor round he'd spent a year building toward. Someone cut the projector, Diane said sharply toward the AV booth, her composure cracking for the first time all night. Cut it now. But it didn't matter, because I had done the other thing my training tells me to always do the moment I find something like that in a public company, 12 hours before a materially misleading pitch to investors. At 6:40 that evening, before the gala even started, from the back of a rideshare on my way downtown, I had forwarded those 3 time-stamped photographs, along with a formal notice of potential securities concern, to the company's outside audit firm, its general counsel, and, because I am a licensed CPA and this is, quite simply, the law, to the relevant compliance contact at the SEC's whistleblower office. It wasn't a scene I engineered on that stage. It was a scene that had already been set in motion 2 hours earlier, quietly, procedurally, the way real accountability actually happens. And the ballroom just happened to be where everyone found out about it at the same time. You can cut the projector, I said to Diane, to the room, to my father still standing beside me with his hand no longer on my shoulder. It won't stop the emails that already went out 3 hours ago. My father turned to look at me. There was something in his face I had waited 15 years to see and had never once let myself expect. Not anger, not embarrassment. Fear. Real fear. The kind that finally understands the ground has already moved. Why didn't you come to me first? He said, quiet, almost to himself. Privately, before all this. I did, I said. I was 21 years old and I brought you 11 pages on a Sunday afternoon. You told me I had trouble with pressure. I looked out at the room, at the investors already pulling out phones, at Diane's frozen smile finally, completely gone, at Trent sitting down hard on the edge of the stage steps like his legs had simply stopped agreeing to hold him. I don't owe you my signature tonight, I said to my father, to all of it. I never did. Then I walked off the stage, into the cool dark of the parking garage, and I let myself cry for exactly 4 minutes in my car before I drove home. The IPO was pulled within 72 hours. Cole Hospitality's board placed Trent on immediate leave pending an independent investigation, which, 11 weeks later, confirmed everything I'd seen on that laptop screen and a good deal more. Just under $9,000 total, some of it dating back nearly 2 years, most of it gone to gambling debts he'd been quietly drowning in since business school. He was never criminally charged. The family settled the exposure privately, restructured the missing funds as a personal loan against his equity, and the company survived, smaller and considerably more humble than the version pitched that night. Diane resigned from her advisory role on the board a month later, framed publicly as stepping back to focus on family. Nobody in that ballroom believed the framing. I'm not sure she did either. I didn't do any of this to destroy them. I want to be honest about that, the same way I was honest about the coffee mug. There is no clean, satisfying triumph in watching your father's face go gray on a stage in front of 200 people who used to admire him. I felt relief. I also felt something closer to grief. Grief for the version of that night I'd let myself half hope for, the one where he said the words at the kitchen table 15 years too late. He called me 8 days after the gala. Not to negotiate, not to ask me to help fix the optics, which is what I fully expected. He just said, "You were right, about the diner, about all of it. I should have picked those 11 pages back up." A long pause. "I'm sorry, Vanessa. Not for tonight. For 21. I didn't forgive him on that call. I'm still not sure I fully have. But I told him the truth, which was that I'd take his apology seriously if it came with actions, and not just a phone call. And 3 weeks later, it did. He had the original diner's financial reconciliation, the same 11 pages I'd printed at 21, professionally reframed, and mailed to my office with a short note. I finally read all 11 pages. I'm keeping a copy. This one's yours. That's the second thing I want to tell you about, the quieter one. A week after the gala, Priya, the assistant who'd stepped between me and Trent without thinking twice, reached out to me privately. She wasn't calling about the company. She said she just wanted me to know that she'd worked events for this family for 6 years, and that in 6 years that ballroom was the first time she'd ever seen anyone in that family tell the truth out loud on purpose. "I don't know you," she said, "but I believed you before you even opened your phone. I just wanted you to know somebody in that room did." I still have that coffee mug on my office shelf. I finally used it, once, the morning the 11 pages arrived in the mail. It felt exactly the way I thought it would, and also nothing at all like I expected. Smaller, quieter, less like winning and more like finally being allowed to put something down. Here's what I know now that I didn't know at 21. The people who call the truth ugly are almost never upset about the truth itself. They're upset that you were the one willing to say it out loud. That's my story. If it meant something to you, drop a comment and tell me. I read every one. And if you want more stories like this, hit subscribe to her final chapter, because there's another one waiting for you next week.